This is PopHealth Week, streaming live on Healthcare Now Radio. I'm Greg Masters, your co-host and executive producer. Joining me in the virtual studio is partner and co-founder Fred Goldstein, lead host and president at Accountable Health, LLC. PopHealth Week is your destination for unfiltered conversations with the innovators driving the future of population health. Want to stay connected? Visit us at popupstudio.productions. Message me on Twitter via @GregMastersMPH, and that's Greg with 2 G's, and follow the show at PopHealth To reach Fred direct, go to www.accountablehealthllc.com. Today we're honored to welcome Dr. Buzz Stewart, CEO and co-founder of Medcurio. Dr. Stewart has spent over 3 decades advancing real-world applications of clinical data, analytics, and digital innovation. Buzz held executive research roles at Sutter Health and Geisinger Health System, where he founded the Center for Health Research. Fred, the mic is yours.
Thanks so much, Greg. And Buzz, welcome to PopHealth Week.
Thanks for having me, Fred.
It's a pleasure to get you on. Thanks so much. Great to hear about the company. I had a little pre-discussion with you. So why don't we start? Give us a little sense of your background and Medcurio.
Okay, so I've been immersed in using health data my whole career. I started as a professor of epidemiology, where I felt very much at home doing research and collecting data on the health of populations. And then I transitioned during that time to my first startup, where I was also using data to scale phase 3 trials. And had that company acquired, and then had the good fortune of being recruited to Geisinger. This is around 2003, just as they were sort of transitioning from what I would call a company town to a national beacon, and was recruited there to start an R&D center. And that was a fabulous journey for me personally and professionally, because Glenn Steele, who was the CEO during the time I was there, did an amazing job of recruiting great talent, and it was both fun and very productive to work with other folks that he brought on board. But I had a really strong interest in using data in real time, and when I got to Geisinger, I thought I came to the promised land, because it was, the early phases of the electronic health record, and I thought, God, the data's already here. I can start automating things tomorrow. And I had some early interest in, trying to scale phase 3 trials, because I saw the way in which it could create real opportunities for clinical practices, and then did other things like using data in real time in specialty care, with integrating patient-reported data and things of that sort into the clinic, so that the doctor and patient could sort of view things together in terms of their outcomes and the labs and the adherence to medication, and they have a more comprehensive discussion of what's working and what's not. But at the end of the day, it was really challenging to move data in real time. And when you can't move the data, it's hard to automate. And I didn't realize at the time that it was the tools that we were forced to use. I thought it was a talent problem. In central Pennsylvania, you're not going to find the best technical talent in the world. And so I thought, I need to be in a place where I can get sort of higher end technical talent. Took the chief research officer position at Sutter, did the same thing. Built an R&D center, had fabulous talent, and ran into the same problem. And so that was the beginning of Medcurio, because after being there for 6 years, my chief technology officer and I looked at each other and we said, we're wasting our time on the front end. If we can't build and put applications into production in a health system where we have first position to get access to data, and we're always over budget and over time, the market can't make it in the same way. And so we decided to pivot and to reinvent real-time interoperability. And so that was what launched Medcurio, basically, as we got to a point where we just said, the future has to be in trying to make real-time data move, but we need a way to do it in a way that's simple and straightforward and secure.
I mean, everybody talks about interoperability. It's the hot topic. It's been the hot topic for years now. So what's made it so difficult to do it?
Yeah, that's a multi-pronged problem. And as I say, I think the one thing that happens so easily is we all fall prey to saying, well, this is the way things are, and so we just do it the way things are. But we have these legacy tools. The tools that are available today are the tools that I used before I left Sutter. So they're legacy tools. Your you end up thinking that these are the tools that were really designed to move data in real time, but I call them workarounds because they weren't really designed for real-time use, and they certainly weren't designed for automation and not for AI. And it's because we have an ensemble of tools. We've got vendor APIs, and so you need permission to use those. So there's a step before that. They're fixed APIs. You get what you get if you're given permission. You have Fire APIs. You get what you get there. So you only get what's in the package, whether you need it or not, or whether it has everything or not that you need. You have HL7. Yeah, so we have a host of these different methods, none of which were designed for what we're trying to use them for. And you end up with two major challenges, I think, with interoperability. One happens to be the precision, completeness, and timeliness of the data you can get. And so there are gaps in all of those with these methods. And so the biggest problem is that you really can't get the data that you need. And so what happens often with somebody who's inventing a solution to try to improve care is they have to step inside the box of what they can get and what they can do. And then they can find their solution to that box. And so they don't imagine in the way that you would ordinarily imagine in designing a solution to really scale it and do things that are automatic and inventive. The second is you have, because you get fixed tools, you get a lot of data that you might not need. And so that adds to the carriage and the inefficiency. There may be needs to transform the data in ways that create more work, and then you have to knit these tools together. So that's the access problem. But I think the bigger challenge, if you just set that aside, is the amount of work, time, and cost that's involved in getting access and putting your application in production. If you want to change things, so I would say the biggest problem we faced at Sutter and Geisinger was we get feedback from doctors, from patients. They want things changed. And it's a 2 to 3 month cycle to make those changes. And this is the real world of application owners. And you can't retain trust and engagement when you have that kind of process. And so I think a lot of times things fail because you can't really respond to the user community in a way that resonates with them. And so you quickly lose trust. And with doctors and nurses, you quickly lose patience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because your example of 2 to 3 months, I was just talking to a friend of mine, and they're trying to get a PDF transferred into one of the major vendors. And they said, well, it's going to take us 8 weeks to set that up.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Well, no, I think that was the bane of my existence. And, as I mentioned, my CTO when I was at Sutter was both brilliant and knew everything about the back end. And then I'd be getting these reports of delays and putting something in production. And I said, I've got deadlines, I've got funders, I've got, so what the hell's going on here? And the same thing would happen with, with changes that we would want to make, where we'd get great feedback from providers or specialists on improving our applications, but the turnaround time was so slow that we would lose their interest, basically.
Wow.
And so I think it was that experience. It was mostly how are we ever going to adapt these things? Because this is complicated work. Automating in real time in a complicated business like healthcare and being on the front lines, you got diverse data, you've got the complex workflows, you've got timing of things that need to be done, and then on top of all of that, you've got the way in which it all has to be stitched together seamlessly, and it's just an impossible job with today's tools.
So, I mean, I go to HIMSS, everything I hear, fire. We've got fire coming out. That's the answer. How is what you built at Medcurio different? What makes this work?
Yeah, so I think Fire is an asset, but the Fire platform, which the ONC and others have pushed, is important, but its original intention was really for the exchange of data between business entities. And so I think it serves some purpose there in trying to standardize the way in which you can move data from one entity to another in a predictable format. Although I would say they still haven't quite solved all the problems around that because there's versioning issues, but certainly it's a step in the right direction. Our interest and focus is within health systems and how we want to enable them to not only have full control of their data, but to optimize the use of it to both improve care, financial sustainability, and patient outcomes. And so Fire is a really good example of some of the tools. You can get access to about 5% of the data fields with Fire. Now, they happen to be really important data fields that are where there's a common need. But, if you're doing something in oncology or cardiology or things of that sort, and you need other data that isn't in the FHIR ensemble, then you're back to that box again in terms of deciding what it is you're going to do, and how much you're going to do with your application. So what we built was we went forward in early 2018 and we said, what are the features of how interoperability should work so that it's seamless? So we had a list of about 8 things where we said, this is really how it should work. And so we built to that. And what we ended up with is a single platform that enables a health system to get access to any of their electronic health record data, even what's known as the blob server or the PDF container, and to do it in a way that takes about 5 to 10% of the usual time and effort. So in our technology, if I was to do a demo and sort of walk you through it, and you're on the health system side, you log in to an interface and you point and click to select the data fields you want to define the patient you want, and you point and click to select the data you want, and then you execute, and a no-code API is created, and in a couple of days you're in production. And so the speed with which you can get exactly the data that you want, not more, not less, is blindingly fast. You can modify those APIs. I'm assuming the audience knows what an API is.
Sure.
You can modify those in minutes. So if you're modifying the front end of an application and your user group says, we'd like to see these other data elements, you just go in and modify that in a few minutes versus 6 to 8 weeks. So the turnaround time is as fast as you can modify the front end, you can modify the plumbing. It's highly scalable. You can build a set of APIs once for one instance, and our customers do this because some of them have multiple instances of Epic, and you just export those to other instances. Our technology talks directly to the shadow server. So it's speaking to the source data, and it's accessing data from the source in its real form. And so you're not getting some transformed version or some modified version of it. And we can output it in different formats, including FHIR format. So if you said you wanted not just the usual FHIR data, but you wanted a lot more than what FHIR usually provides, we could also build APIs and output it in that format. So it has all the things that we wanted to build applications where the integration itself was not 50 or 60% of the work, but just 5% of the work. That we felt that's the way the world had to be, that the focus had to be on the solutions, not on trying to get data to the solutions.
Got it. So you've got an efficiency play in essence with this, and an ability to get more information or all of the information accessed through your system.
Yeah. I always say that if you want to, and our focus has always been using data in real time to drive automation, and AI I think has amped that game up because AI is much more demanding. And I always say that workflow automation in healthcare is a precision business, and it's precision engineering on the software side. And the data that powers it has to be very precise, right time, right place, right format. There can't be any nicks in the data. And so it's why it's so hard to make automation work with the tools that we have, because getting that kind of precision is difficult.
Mm-hmm. So can you give us some examples of how it's been used and some of the success stories?
Yeah, my favorite story is in the space where we've actually formed our first channel partner relationship, and that's with Salesforce. And that journey began with one of our first customers a number of years ago that was trying to use Salesforce, very basic service. I mean, not anywhere close to the kind of work that you did, with population health management and value-based care, but very basic, just trying to get going on it. And they couldn't get one data field to move over in real time to the Salesforce cloud. And they tried to, they roamed around for 4 months. They talked to the vendor. They couldn't help them. They had our technology and they called us and they said, can you help us with this? And we're scratching our heads saying, well, what's the problem? You can access any data. And then we sort of, gave them instructions on how to use the technology better, because we can't use it. It's on their side of the firewall, so they use it. And they built an API and had it in production in 2 days, and they solved the problem. And then I think the lights went on inside of that business unit, because they thought, they had a kind of WTF moment where they thought, we can do anything. And we periodically get reports on the traffic going across our platform. So they went from about 10,000 API calls a day on our platform. A year later, a year and a half later, they were doing 1.5 million. And what they did was they realized that they could just populate any CRM workflow because it was a no-brainer. They just build these APIs and they're in production in a week. And then, so the integration part became just no work, and it was really a focus on the CRM part. And so they scaled services to the kinds of things that I think you're very familiar with: care gap closure, Medicare Advantage care gap closure, referral management, all the areas that I would say are the pain points, where it's always been difficult to scale things in a way where you could have a revenue and outcome impact. And so that then led to our relationship with Salesforce, where they realized that our technology had something to offer in terms of their customer base.
Just tuning in, you're listening to PopHealth Week on Healthcare Now Radio, where the future of health meets insight, innovation, and impact. Today's guest, Dr. Walter Buzz Stewart, CEO and co-founder of Medcurio, whose tagline is, quote, "Real conversations, real data, real health transformation," end quote. Stay tuned for the rest of the story.
So they could rapidly access these data sets that they needed to then go and build something else.
Yeah. So the sort of the way in which I characterize the current world is the developers live in a box defined by the data they can get access to. And this One Health System, the team got out of the box. And once they were out of the box, then it was the focus was all on the solution and trying to optimize the solution. So that's my favorite use case because it has the elements of what happens when you're no longer shackled by what you're told you can get access to. And when you're liberated from that and are able to use your data in ways that make sense, there's a crowd effect that happens pretty quickly in terms of people realizing that they can start to really do things that we've been talking about for a decade.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe longer. So you talked about hitting the shadow server, et cetera. How do you ensure security? What have you got built into that?
Yeah, that's a really important part of, I think, our offering. And we thought a lot about that as we went into this because we came from the healthcare side of the world and understood how important that was. So our technology is only installed on-prem behind the firewall because it has to be configured to an instance of an EHR, and the system, folks on the health system side are the ones that use it. We're SOC 2 Type 2 approved. The platform is managed by a security manager or a security officer. So you have to have security rights to log in to even build an API. And even that doesn't give you control over deploying it. You can build it and test it, but it doesn't mean you can deploy it. The security manager has a feature that I really like, which is field level control. So you can build an API, for example, and have different role groups that use that API, but you block access to certain fields depending upon the role group. So you might have a role group that you don't want to get access to PHI. So that role group but they can use the PHI, but it's automatically blocking those data. I like it because we also have 100% auditing of what data are going where. And having lived in a system where governance was always a challenge and you really didn't know where data was flying even within the system, having a way of tracking that precisely is a huge asset. We have state-of-the-art encryption that would be expected. We don't believe in data persistence. We believe that if you can get it from the source in real time or whatever you want it, use it and then let it go. And then I would just say one other thing, the platform is being used by, I'd say, one system for API governance, right? Because they have everything in one place. They can see everything. They can manage everything. So we gave a lot of thought to security because it's a quintessential need, I think, when you're moving data in real time.
And in the systems world, health system world, where's sort of this, is it large systems? Can it be smaller systems? Who uses it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'd have to say that I had a conversion. I used to think it was just going to be the top 10%, the big players right now, because they were the only ones thinking about automation, if they were, and using data in real time. And they had the resources, I think, to sort of have that bandwidth. But I think that probably the bigger market for us is in the lower 70%. And the reason why I think that is it's almost analogous to the leap that happened in going from no phone to wireless, right? That if you don't have a lot of infrastructure and you don't have any legacy, you can sort of leap a generation of technology and step right into the future. And I think that where we're starting to move is to think about collaborating with partners and building real-time applications so that use data in real time and display it in a way that give insights on how to manage things wherever you would need it. And because we can scale the use of APIs for those kinds of applications, it's almost like we have a plug and play capability. So that's a direction that we're moving in, because the lower 70%, if you just enable them to use their data in real time and make it simple to get going really fast, you start to get them to perform at a level that they couldn't perform. So I think the needs are different in terms of where we're going, but I have very different views on what is going to sell in each of those segments.
Mhm. So what's the future look like for data interoperability? Where do you see that all going?
I think FHIR will be the dominant vehicle for exchange of data between entities. I have a feeling, though, that because our technology is so flexible and because we've adapted it to the back end of the data system that's used by Epic and Meditech. It's called InterSystems Iris Cache, and so we've built a version of that. We'll probably do the same thing for other data systems as we expand. But we're also integrating things like event management and orchestration, so you have just one workflow where you can tie everything together simply. So I think that the future of our technology, and hopefully others that come along and give systems control of their data, to me is pretty bright, because it's the barrier to catching up with where the world is going with automation and AI. And I see the world changing as we're able to give systems control, taking the kind of work that I would say you did in population health and value-based care, but taking it up a level where there's a lot more intelligence that can automatically be brought to play. There's a lot more automation that can be done in managing patients, and where when somebody talks to a patient, they're very well informed and they're optimized and thinking about what it is that might best serve that patient. But I see us moving towards that kind of precision care world, but doing it at a marginal cost with scalable services, I think.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I think back to the days of doing care management, or and how much work I thought, gosh, if I could do that again today with the technology we have. But as you're talking about, this whole idea of real-time data, I think is ultimately critical. And it comes back to this point I've been looking at, particularly with Parkinson's, we discussed about. At the end of the day, you had 4 visits with the doctor, 8, and those were your data points. And then you added care managers and you added another one a month or something. But we really need real-time data on these individuals, and because their life is like a wave,
Yeah.
and if we can begin to track that wave and understand it, we could do some amazing things. So in essence, your system would allow people to quickly create the ability to integrate those various data elements into a real-time view of that patient that could
Yeah,
then
I
be
think
acted on by AI or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, because I think that the value of that real-time monitoring, especially for high-risk patients, and being able to have a seamless, scalable way of intervening where you're taking the work off the front line of care, but moving it to, support services, is a transformation, I think, that will make a real difference, because the outreach is low cost. You're getting intelligence in real time to the agent that's better informed about the patient. So all that stuff is brought together. Somebody doesn't have to rummage through a record to figure it all out. And there's a layer of intelligence that can be added to it, in a way that is impossible for a human to do. But when they have the content there in front of it, they know what to do with it in terms of having a productive conversation with a patient.
Yeah, it's really about that move from, you know, predictive analytics, where we can predict sort of what's going on, up to prescriptive analytics, where we can say, here's what you do with this information, here's how to make that difference. So you, in essence, can allow the pulling in of all that real-time data, and then you could put, as you said, these smart agents on it, because what creams everybody now is trying to build that stuff is so expensive and timely. And then all you hear is, I'm overloaded with data. What do I do with this? Well, that's when you begin to look at the AI and the analytics, right?
Yeah. Well, and I'd say that that's a challenge that I would say companies like Salesforce have faced, that health systems are underutilizing their platform because they can't move the data in. And so a dominant use of that platform is really on the marketing side, which is, Salesforce sells to people who sell. And what we bring is a way to start to grow more capability on the healthcare delivery side in the way in which we're seeing with a couple of our customers and how they've really grown in ways that I think is the direction we have to move. I think that the only way to solve the financial and quality problems that we face is to bring in automation and do it in a way that takes the best of what technology can do with data and what humans can do with more precise, informative content, I think. And taking the load of work that always falls to the front line, which they just don't have the means to deliver on.
Right. So give a quick sense, how large is the company?
Company is, we're 8 employees. Our technology is enterprise grade, but a very light footprint, very sophisticated. My interest is partnering with companies that want to manage the service side of our business because I want to focus on building more and more interoperability capabilities, because the more of that we can do, the more of that we can make so simple for health systems, the more they're going to see the vision of starting to use their data assets in a way that makes sense to them. And so we'll grow, I think, probably in 2025 when we hit certain milestones. But it's more to sort of get into the solution side of the business. So I think that we know what we can do with our platform. And so we know solutions that we can build or partner with and amp up with our technology in a way that expands our purview of what we want to get into.
Well, it's fascinating because I believe, as you said, with your epidemiology background, obviously you used to understand the importance of this and what can be done with the data. But with your history of where you worked through, you've obviously brought in some incredibly talented people to get this thing built.
Yeah, I really, I'm sort of blessed in that way in terms of having a great crew, and it's the same crew that's been with us from day one. So they really are committed.
That's fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed the pre-conversation very much, and a pleasure to have time with you.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. Thanks so much for coming on. So with that, I'll send it back to you, Greg.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. A special thank you to our guest, Dr. Walter Buzz Stewart of Medcurio, for sharing his deep insights into the evolving world of real-time EHR integration, precision health, and the transformative power of digital health innovation. Buzz's work reminds us that unlocking the potential of clinical data isn't just a technical challenge, it's a strategic imperative for the future of value-based care and population health. To learn more about Medcurio and their platform, visit www.medcurio.com. If you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, share with your network, and follow me and the show on Twitter via @GregMastersMPH, and that's Greg with 2 G's, and @PopHealthWeek. Catch us live every weekday on Healthcare Now Radio at 5:30 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Adjust accordingly if you're joining us from the West Coast. On behalf of Fred Goldstein, the crew at Healthcare Now Radio, and myself, Greg Masters, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay well, stay informed, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in population health.